That morning, no one expected a single act of defiance to change military history. What began as routine training became a moment every soldier on base would remember, and one that would test the difference between following orders and doing what's right. The sun hung low over the Hereford training grounds, casting long shadows across the dew-slicked parade square. Staff Sergeant Elena Hargrove stood at the front of the formation, her boots planted firm on the cracked concrete, the faint scent of wet earth rising from the nearby Severn River. At 34, she was a fixture in the 22nd Special Air Service Regiment's selection process, known simply as selection, a woman who had earned her tabs through 2 tours in Helmand and a classified op in the Hindu Kush. Her uniform was impeccable, olive-drab trousers tucked into polished combat boots, the SAS beret angled precisely on her close-cropped dark hair. She scanned the line of recruits, their faces a mix of exhaustion and resolve under the weight of 80-pound rucksacks. "Form up," her voice cut through the morning mist, steady and unyielding, like the crack of a rifle bolt. The recruits, 20 young men and women from across the UK, ages 19 to 25, snapped into position. This was Tab 1 of selection, a grueling 40-kilometre trek across the Brecon beacons, designed to weed out the weak before the real tests began. Eleanor had run it herself a decade ago, her father's voice echoing in her mind during the endless uphill slogs. "SAS isn't about speed, love," he'd say in that thick Birmingham accent, his own beret gathering dust on the mantel back home. "It's about finishing when every muscle screams to quit." She moved down the line, eyes sharp. Private Tom Riley, a lanky lad from Manchester, held his rifle at port arms with a slight tremor. Beside him, Corporal Liam Sykes from London shifted his weight, his jaw set. And at the end, Lance Corporal Mia Patel, the only other woman in the group, met Elena's gaze with quiet determination. Elena nodded once, respect earned, not given. Her own path hadn't been easy. Whispers followed her through the ranks. The daughter of a legendary SAS operator who had served in the Falklands and Northern Ireland. Sergeant Major Hargrove, retired now, living quietly in Edgbaston with his war stories locked away. But Eleanor carried his legacy like an invisible rucksack, the discipline, the unshakable calm under fire. "Listen up," Eleanor said, her breath visible in the chill air. The recruits straightened, the scrape of boots on concrete the only sound. "This isn't a hike. It's a filter. You move as one, or you don't move at all. Navigation points are marked. Follow them, or get lost in the hills. Hydration every hour, no exceptions. Any questions?" Silence. "Good." She glanced at her watch. "So 600 hours. The chopper's rotors thrummed faintly in the distance, ferrying supplies to the start point. Elena's radio crackled on her shoulder. "Hargrove, this is base. All clear for departure?" "Affirmative," she replied, keying the mic. Static hissed back, then nothing. Routine, predictable. That's what made selection work. It stripped away the chaos of combat and left only the grind. The choice to push or break. As the formation double-timed toward the transport trucks, Eleanor fell in at the rear, her eyes on the stragglers. Sykes muttered something under his breath to Riley, a low chuckle escaping. She caught the edge of it, Birmingham slang, mocking her accent perhaps, or the way she carried herself. "Bloke's dad was proper SAS, reckon she's got the grit?" Riley snorted, but they fell silent as she approached. "Save the breath for the trail," she said evenly, her voice carrying the flat vowels of her hometown. No anger, just fact. Sykes met her eyes, a flicker of challenge there, but he nodded. Recruits often tested boundaries early, poking at the instructors to see what held. Elena had seen it before, the ones who mouthed off about family legacies, assuming her path was paved. They didn't know the nights she'd spent proving otherwise, the CO who once questioned if a woman from the Midlands could hack it in the regiment. The trucks rumbled to life, diesel fumes mixing with the river's damp scent. Elena climbed into the lead vehicle, her mind already mapping the route. Steep ascents through bracken-covered slopes, false summits that played tricks on the mind. She'd brought her K9 partner Rex, a sleek German shepherd with a coat the color of wet slate. He sat alert in the truck bed, ears pricked, sensing the shift in her posture. Rex had been her shadow since Helmand, trained for detection but bonded in the quiet moments, his nose picking up IEDs when human eyes failed. "Steady, boy," she murmured, scratching his neck. His tail thumped once against the canvas, a silent affirmation. By 0700, they were at the trailhead, the beacons looming like silent sentinels under a grey sky. Eleanor briefed the group one last time. Primary objective, reach the finish by 1800. Secondary, stay alive. Move out. The line stretched single file up the first incline, boots crunching gravel, breaths sinking to the rhythm of the march. Wind whispered through the gorse, carrying the faint tang of sheep wool from distant pastures. Elena brought up the rear with Rex, watching for signs of falter. Sykes lagged deliberately, turning to Riley with a grin. "Oi, you hear about Hargrove's old man? SAS legend, they say. Bet she got in on Daddy's coattails. What's a Brummybird doing leading us lot?" Riley glanced back, voice low but carrying on the wind. "Yeah, my dad was SAS. Like that opens doors. Reckon she's soft under all that parade ground polish." Eleanor's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Provocation was part of it, testing resolve. Rex whined softly, sensing her tension, his nose twitching toward the group. She placed a hand on his head, grounding herself. Her father had taught her that. Ignore the barbs, focus on the mission. But as the trail steepened, Sykes's words lingered, a spark in the dry tinder of unit dynamics. Halfway up the first ridge, the real test began. Rain spat from low clouds, turning the path to mud. A recruit slipped, cursing as his ruck snagged on rocks. Elena moved forward, steadying him with a firm grip. "On your feet, Private, eyes front." He nodded, wiping mud from his face, but Sykes watched from above, his smirk visible even through the drizzle. By noon, the group had fragmented slightly, Patel pushing ahead with quiet efficiency, Riley breathing hard but steady. Elena called a brief halt at a navigation point, a weathered stone marker etched with coordinates. "Check your maps. 15 minutes." She knelt by Rex, offering him water from her canteen. His tongue lapped steadily, eyes scanning the horizon as if he too understood the stakes. Sykes approached then, casual but pointed. "Staff Sergeant, permission to speak? Just wondering, your dad's stories must make these tabs easier to wear. Ever feel the weight of that?" The words hung, a direct jab. The other recruits paused, ears tuning in. Elena rose slowly, meeting his gaze. Rain traced paths down her camouflage, but her voice remained level. "Permission granted, Corporal, but stories don't carry rucksacks. Actions do. Get your gear sorted. We're moving." He held her stare a beat too long, then turned away. Rex growled low, a rumble from deep in his chest, hackles rising. Elena silenced him with a hand signal, but the moment rippled through the group. Whispers followed as they resumed the march, doubt, curiosity, the first crack in the chain of command. As the afternoon wore on, the path narrowed to a slick traverse along a sheer drop, the river a distant roar below. Eleanor's mind raced, not to the taunts, but to what came next. Selection wasn't just physical. It forged bonds or broke them, and in the SAS, loyalty wasn't inherited. It was proven one defiant step at a time. Little did they know the real defiance was just beginning. The rain thickened as the afternoon dragged on, turning the trail into a quagmire that sucked at their boots with every step. Elena Hargrove kept her position at the rear, her gaze fixed on the line ahead, where the recruits' silhouettes blurred against the slate-grey sky. Rex padded beside her, his paws leaving shallow prints in the mud, his breath steady despite the downpour. The dog's presence was a quiet anchor, his senses attuned to the group's rhythm, ears flicking at the slightest irregularity. Elena adjusted her poncho, the plastic crinkling softly, and keyed her radio for a status check. "Base, this is Hargrove. Group at Checkpoint Bravo, en route to Charlie, ETA 1400. Acknowledged, Hargrove. Winds picking up. Watch for low visibility." The voice from Hereford crackled back, laced with static from the storm. Elena acknowledged with a curt, "Roger," then scanned the formation. They were holding, but the strain showed, shoulders hunched under sodden rucks, breaths coming in ragged bursts. Selection's first tab was unforgiving, a deliberate assault on body and will, mirroring the unpredictability of ops in distant theatres. Up ahead, Corporal Liam Sykes had taken point in a loose cluster with Private Riley and a few others, their pace deliberate but edged with fatigue. The taunts from earlier had simmered down under the march's demands, but Elena sensed the undercurrent, like the faint hum of a live wire beneath the patter of rain. She'd faced it before, the assumption that her father's shadow granted her an unearned edge. Sergeant Major Hargrove's name carried weight in the regiment, whispered in mess halls from Credenhill to the SAS's Stirling lines. He'd pulled her aside after her passing out parade, his calloused hand on her shoulder, eyes sharp as polished bayonets. "They'll test you twice as hard, Elena. Prove it with your deeds, not my tales." Birmingham grit, he'd called it, stubborn as the factories that once lined the canals, unyielding under pressure. As they crested a false summit, the path levelled briefly onto a windswept plateau dotted with gorse bushes, their yellow blooms battered flat. Eleanor called the halt. 10 minutes, hydrate and refit. The group dropped rucks with relieved groans, steam rising from their wet gear like battlefield smoke. Rex shook himself, sending droplets flying, then sat at Elena's heel, his dark eyes watchful. She pulled a ration bar from her pack, breaking off a piece for him, his reward for the miles. "Good lad," she murmured, her voice lost in the gale. The bond with Rex went beyond protocol. In Helmand, he'd alerted to an ambush that saved her squad, his low bark cutting through the night like a warning shot. Loyalty, pure and instinctual, no ranks or legacies required. Sykes wandered over during the break, his face flushed from the climb, water streaming from his helmet brim. He carried his map case loosely, feigning casualness as he nodded to Rex. "Handler's got her shadow today, eh? Dog's more SAS than some of us, I reckon." His tone was light, but the jab landed, questioning her reliance on the K9 unit, implying it softened her edge. Elena didn't rise to it immediately. She checked her compass bearings, the needle steady despite the wind's howl. "Rex earns his keep, Corporal. As do we all. Your nav check?" He unfolded the map, tracing a finger along the contour lines. "Solid. But tell me, Staff Sergeant, growing up with the old man's war stories, did they skip the parts about proving yourself without the family badge?" Riley hovered nearby, pretending to adjust his laces, but his ears were tuned. A couple of other recruits, Lance Corporal Patel among them, glanced over, the air thickening with unspoken curiosity. Eleanor's hand paused on Rex's collar, feeling the warmth of his fur through the damp. The question wasn't new. It echoed the doubts she'd buried during her own selection, when a grizzled trooper had cornered her in the barn, sneering about "Daddy's girl from Broome." She'd run the tabs harder, silenced them with results. But here, leading, the dynamic shifted, her authority a target for their insecurities. Duty demanded she maintain order, squash the discord before it fractured the group. Yet morality tugged. Calling him out publicly could brand her thin-skinned, fuel the very narrative they pushed. "Stories are just that, Sykes," she replied evenly, folding her map with precise creases. "The regiment doesn't hand out berets for bedtime tales. It demands you carry the load, yours and the team's. Focus on that." Rex shifted, a soft whine escaping as he sensed her restrained tension, his nose nudging her knee. Sykes smirked, wiping rain from his eyes. "Fair enough. But word is, your dad's the reason you're out here barking orders." "My dad was SS. Opens doors, don't it? Makes a vet from Birmingham sound like she belongs." The words spilled out louder now, drawing nods from Riley and a stocky private named Jenkins. Patel shot Eleanor a sympathetic glance but said nothing, her own position as the minority woman making silence strategic. The plateau fell quiet, save for the wind's moan through the gorse. Elena stood, signaling the end of the break. "On your feet. We move." But as the group reformed, the provocation lingered, a rift widening in the chain. Sykes's challenge wasn't isolated. It mirrored the regiment's underbelly, where legacies bred resentment, and women like her and Patel navigated invisible barriers. Elena's conscience warred, obey the protocol of discipline, or confront the erosion of respect that could doom a squad in the field. They pushed on toward the next ravine, the descent treacherous with loose scree. Rex led the way down a narrow sheep track, his sure-footed trot alerting to unstable ground. Elena followed, her mind mapping contingencies. If Sykes escalated, a formal report to the DS could end his run, but it risked alienating the others, turning selection into a grudge match. Her father's lesson echoed, "Integrity's quiet, Elena. It doesn't shout back." Halfway down, disaster struck, not from malice, but the storm's fury. Jenkins slipped on the wet rock, his ruck unbalancing him as he tumbled toward the edge. Shouts erupted. "Man down!" Riley lunged, grabbing an arm, but the private's weight pulled him forward. Elena reacted on instinct, barking, "Hold formation, Rex, steady!" The dog planted himself, growling as Elena dove in, her boots digging into the mud. She hooked Jenkins' harness with one hand, Riley with the other, muscles burning from the strain. "Pull! Now!" Together, they hauled him back, Jenkins gasping on the ground, face ashen. The group clustered, breaths heaving. The near miss a stark reminder of the Tab's peril. Sykes, who'd been just ahead, turned back, his earlier smirk gone. "You all right, mate?" he said, helping Jenkins to his feet. But his eyes met Elena's, gratitude flickering beneath the challenge, the first crack in his armor. "Check him for injuries," Elena ordered, her voice steady despite the adrenaline surge. "Patel, assist. Rest of you secure the line." As they stabilized Jenkins, a sprained ankle, nothing broken, the dynamic shifted subtly. Whispers turned from mockery to murmurs of her quick action, Rex's alert positioning having bought the seconds needed. Yet the taunt's echo remained, a test unresolved. By 1600 they reached the ravine floor, the river's roar drowning the rain. Elena called another brief halt. Radioing base for medevac cords if needed, Sykes approached again, this time without the edge. "That was sharp work, Staff Sergeant. Dog too. It wasn't apology, but concession, a recruit gauging boundaries." "Team effort," she replied, clipping Rex's lead. "Keep it that way." As the march resumed, the moral tension coiled tighter. Obedience preserved order, but addressing the prejudice head-on might forge true loyalty. In the SAS, where lives hinged on trust, the choice loomed larger than the beacons themselves. The defiance, when it came, would redefine them all. The shadows lengthened across the ravine floor as the group pressed on, the river's relentless churn masking the slap of boots against slick pebbles. Helena Hargrove led the reformed line now, having taken point after the Jenkins incident to set a deliberate pace, steady, unforgiving, the kind that built endurance without inviting more slips. Rex trotted at her flank, his coat matted but his gait unerring, nose questing the air for any shift in the terrain's scent. The storm had eased to a persistent drizzle, leaving the air heavy with the mineral tang of wet stone and the faint, earthy musk of disturbed soil. Eleanor's radio remained silent, a small mercy. Base would expect them at the final checkpoint by dusk, but the Tab's true measure lay in the miles yet to grind. Behind her, the recruits maintained a tighter formation, the near miss forging a fragile unity. Lance Corporal Patel walked with Jenkins, supporting his limping gait, her voice low and instructional. "Lean into the good foot, wait forward." Private Riley had fallen back to cover the rear, his earlier chuckles replaced by focused silence. But Corporal Sykes lingered in the middle, his steps measured, eyes flicking toward Elena's back. The concession from moments ago hadn't erased the barbs. If anything, the rescue had complicated them, turning resentment into a sharper probe. In the regiment's unforgiving forge, doubt could fester like an untreated wound, threatening the whole unit. They crossed a shallow ford, the icy water numbing their calves as it rushed knee-high. Elena paused midstream, signaling Rex to test the current first, his paws slicing through without hesitation. A low bark confirming solid footing. "Cross in pairs," she called over the roar, her voice carrying the clipped authority honed in briefing rooms from Kabul to Credenhill. The group complied, water splashing in rhythmic bursts, harnesses creaking under the load. Sykes paired with Riley, their murmurs lost to the flow, but Elena caught fragments. "Still reckon she's riding the old man's coattails? Brummy vet or not?" She let it pass, focusing on the far bank, a steep scramble up clay-smeared roots and boulders. Duty dictated discipline over confrontation, A public dressing down could rally some but alienate others, fracturing the trust essential for selection's later phases. Yet, as she hauled herself upward, fingers digging into cold earth, her conscience stirred. Her father's legacy wasn't a crutch, it was a beacon, one she'd earned through nights of solo patrols in the Hindu Kush, where Rex's alerts had meant the difference between return and regret. Ignoring the mockery preserved order, but at what cost? If unchecked, it could poison the squad's cohesion, echoing the fractures she'd seen in mixed units overseas. At the top, the path widened into a boggy moorland, heather brushing their legs like whispering doubts. Elena called the final halt of the day. Checkpoint Charlie, refit and report. The recruits collapsed in a loose semicircle, steam rising from their forms as they shrugged off rucks. Rex circled the perimeter. His ears perked at distant sheep calls, a vigilant shadow ensuring no unseen threats. Elena knelt to check her GPS, the screen's glow faint in the fading light, coordinates aligning with the tab's endpoint, a remote bothy 5 kilometers hence. She offered Rex a measured pat, feeling the steady thrum of his heartbeat under her palm. Almost there, boy. His tail flicked once, a silent pact renewed. Sykes approached again, this time with Jenkins in tow, the injured private's face drawn but grateful. Staff Sergeant, Jenkins here's holding, but that ankle's swelling. Permission to adjust his pack weight? His tone was procedural, but his eyes held a glint, the challenge evolving, now laced with the group's collective gaze. Riley and a few others watched from their rests, maps forgotten. Patel busied herself with her own gear, but her posture tensed, aware of the undercurrent. Granted, Elena replied, rising to assess Jenkins herself. She probed the ankle gently, eliciting a wince. Tape it tight, Patel, assist, no excuses on the last leg. As she worked, Sykes leaned in, voice pitched just loud enough for the circle. Quick thinking back there, dog helped, sure. But let's be straight, your dad's name probably got you the handler slot. My dad was SAS. That's the real alert system in it. Opens doors for a combat vet from Birmingham, who wouldn't otherwise cut it, leading blokes like us. The words landed like a poorly aimed round, scattering ripples through the group. Riley stifled a laugh, Jenkins shifted uncomfortably, and Patel's hands paused on the tape roll. The moor fell hushed, wind sighing through the heather, the air thick with the scent of damp wool and unspoken judgment. Eleanor's pulse quickened, but she held her stance, boots rooted like the bothy's stone walls in the distance. This was the violation, the provocation breaching the chain, not in whispers but openly, testing her before witnesses. Obedience urged a dismissal, maintain the routine to the finish line. But morality demanded reckoning. Silence now would embolden them, erode the respect that bound SAS operators in the shadows of real ops. She straightened, meeting Sykes's stare, her Birmingham vowel steady as a rifle's report. Corporal, stand at ease. He complied, but the smirk lingered. Eleanor let the pause stretch, Rex rising to her side with a soft growl, sensing the shift. Legacies don't lead tabs. They inspire, or they don't. My father taught me the regiment by example. Serve without fanfare, prove it in the dirt. If you doubt that, drop and give me 20. Now. Sykes blinked, the command hanging. The group froze, Riley's eyes widening, Jenkins averting his gaze. No one moved to intervene. This was selection's raw edge, where instructors enforced boundaries. Sykes dropped slowly, push-ups measured in the mud, his breaths grunting out. 1 con, 2. Elena watched impassively, but inside, the act weighed. Discipline asserted, but had it bridged the rift or widened it? As he finished, mud-streaked and silent, she nodded. On your feet. We finish strong. The march resumed under a clearing sky, stars pricking the dusk. Whispers followed, but they carried a new tone, respect tinged with wariness. Elena's defiance, quiet and procedural, had exposed the prejudice, forcing the group to confront it. Rex pressed close, his warmth a reminder of unbreakable bonds. Yet the reckoning was public now, rippling toward the base where reports would follow. In the SAS, one act could redefine legacies, turning mockery into mentorship, or fracture the line irreparably. As the bothy lights flickered into view, the moral coil tightened. Her integrity had sparked the first reform, but the cost lingered in every step. Comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far stories of courage and integrity can reach. The bothy's dim lanterns cast a warm glow against the encroaching night. A squat stone structure hunkered on the moor like a forgotten outpost. Eleanor Hargrove kept the pace brisk on the final approach, her boots sinking slightly into the softened turf. The air now crisp with the scent of pine resin from the distant tree line. Rex stayed close, his flanks brushing her leg with each stride, his breath a rhythmic puff in the cooling dusk. The recruits trailed in a weary column, their silhouettes etched against the emerging stars, exhaustion etched in slumped shoulders, and the faint clink of gear. The tab's end was in sight, but the day's fractures lingered, Sykes' push-ups a punctuation mark on the mounting tension, not its resolution. They reached the bothy at 1945, the wooden door creaking open under Elena's push to reveal a Spartan interior, trestle tables scarred from countless briefings, a potbelly stove radiating faint heat, and the musty odor of damp wool and old timber. "In and secure," she ordered, her voice echoing off the low beams. The group filed in, dropping rucks with muffled thuds, the relief palpable as they shed ponchos and shook off the day's grime. Rex entered last, circling the room once before settling at Elena's feet, his eyes scanning the newcomers with professional detachment. Outside, the wind had died to a whisper, leaving only the distant call of a nightjar to punctuate the silence. Eleanor moved to the head of the table, pulling out her logbook under the lantern's yellow light. "Debrief in 5. Hydrate, check injuries, and report any issues." She noted the times. All had made it. Jenkins limping but intact, a testament to the group's resilience despite the discord. Patel helped Jenkins to a bench, wrapping fresh tape around his ankle with efficient hands, while Riley stoked the stove, coaxing flames to life. The warmth spread slowly, steam curling from drying boots like battlefield mist. Elena keyed her radio. "Base, Hargrove. Group intact at endpoint. Request extraction at 2100. Roger Hargrove, chopper inbound, DS en route for pickup assessment." The reply came clear. No static to obscure it. Elena clipped the mic back, her mind already shifting to the report she'd file. Incidents like Sykes' outburst weren't casual. In selection, they signaled deeper rifts, ones that could unravel a troop in the field. Her father's words resurfaced, spoken over tea in their Edgbaston kitchen years ago. "The regiment's a machine, Eleanor. One loose bolt, and it jams." She'd nodded then, 16 and wide-eyed, absorbing the lessons from his faded photos of the Falklands, grainy images of mud-smeared faces, and the quiet pride of survival. Sykes sat across the table, nursing a canteen, his mud-caked uniform a mirror of the others. He met her gaze briefly, then looked away, the earlier defiance tempered but not extinguished. The push-ups had brought silence, but the group's dynamics hummed with undercurrents. Riley shooting sidelong glances, Jenkins rubbing his ankle with subdued gratitude. This was the violation crystallizing, not just personal jabs, but a challenge to her command, rooted in assumptions about her gender, her accent, her lineage. In the SAS, where operators vanished into shadows for months, trust was the invisible thread. Mockery like Sykes could snap it, turning partners into liabilities. As the minutes ticked, Lance Corporal Patel approached Elena quietly, her voice low amid the crackle of the stove. "Staff Sergeant, that business with Sykes, it's stirring them up. Jenkins mentioned it to me. He's grateful for the save, but the lads are whispering about favoritism now, tying it back to your dad." Patel's eyes were steady, her own selection scars fresh, another woman navigating the regiment's unyielding code. Elena nodded, appreciating the candor. "Noted. Keep eyes on. We'll address at base." But inside, the moral test sharpened. Obedience meant logging it dryly, letting the DS handle discipline. Conscience pushed for more, a direct intervention to cauterize the wound before it spread, proving her authority wasn't inherited, but forged. The door banged open then, admitting 2 directing staff from Sterling Lines, Captain Reese Harlan, a wiry veteran with a scar tracing his jaw from a Sierra Leone op, and Sergeant Major Kane, broad-shouldered and impassive, his beret shadowing eyes that missed nothing. Wind gusted in behind them, carrying the thrum of the incoming chopper. "Hargrove," Harlan greeted, scanning the room with clinical efficiency. "Report." Eleanor stood, saluting crisply, the recruits snapping to attention in a ripple of movement. Rex rose too, alert but silent. "Tab completed, sir. All accounted for. One minor injury, sprained ankle, stabilized." She recounted the route, times, and contingencies, her delivery precise, the Birmingham lilt underscoring each fact without apology. Harlan nodded, then turned to the group. "At ease. Any issues to raise?" The room held its breath, boots shifting on the plank floor, the stove's pop the only interruption. Sykes hesitated, then stepped forward, his posture ramrod straight. "Sir, permission to speak. During the halt at Charlie there was tension. Staff Sergeant Hargrove handled it, but some of us questioned her quals, based on family ties. My dad was SAS. You know, it got heated." The words dropped like a flare, illuminating the reckoning. Harlan's brow furrowed, Kane's gaze locking on Sykes with the weight of judgment. Whispers died. Patel stiffened. Riley paled. Eleanor felt the coil tighten, public now. Witnesses from the highest chain, the provocation laid bare before brass. Duty urged defense, but morality held her steady. Let the facts stand, her actions the rebuttal. "Corporal Sykes voiced doubts about my command legitimacy, sir," she interjected evenly. "I addressed it with corrective discipline, no further disruption." Harlan turned to her, eyes probing. "Details, Staff Sergeant." She recounted the exchange verbatim, the jabs at her heritage, the push-ups, her voice level, Rex's soft whine the only underscore from beneath the table. Kane jotted notes in a battered pad, the scratch of pen on paper echoing. Sykes interjected once, defending his intent to clarify, but Harlan cut him off. "This isn't a pub debate, Corporal. In the regiment, doubt in leadership is a liability. You'll report to me at base for formal review." The chopper's rotors built in the distance, a low thunder vibrating the walls. Harlan addressed the group. "Selection tests more than endurance. It forges trust. Undermine that and you're out." His words hung, a directive rippling through the ranks, Jenkins nodding subtly, Riley averting eyes. Sykes stood silent, the smirk long gone, replaced by the stark reality of consequence. Elena clipped Rex's lead, feeling the dog's steady presence ground her. This was the public pivot, her integrity exposed, not as weakness, but as the regiment's quiet enforcer, sparking the first institutional echo. As they filed out into the night, the chopper's downdraft whipping heather and scattering lanterns glow, Eleanor fell in beside Patel. "It'll settle," she murmured, the words more for herself. The moral choice, confronting without escalating, had preserved order, but the ripples extended. Sykes's review could end his run, reform the group's respect, or expose deeper biases in the chain. Harlan clapped her shoulder as they boarded. A rare gesture. "Solid lead, Hargrove. Your old man would approve." The bird lifted off, the beacons shrinking below, lights of Hereford winking in the valley. Rex leaned into her side, his warmth a bulwark against the chill. In the SAS, legacies weren't shields. They were tests, and Elena's defiance had just begun to rewrite them. But as the base loomed, the cost sharpened. One recruit's fall could mentor the rest, or fracture the line she'd sworn to hold. The night air hummed with possibility, the quiet breath before true reform. The chopper's blades sliced through the night sky, a steady thrum vibrating through the cabin as the Hereford base sprawled below like a grid of shadowed barracks and floodlit helipads. Eleanor Hargrove sat strapped in beside Rex, the dog's head resting against her thigh, his warmth seeping through the damp fabric of her trousers. The scent of aviation fuel mingled with the lingering earthiness of the moor, sharp and metallic in the confined space. Captain Harlan occupied the jump seat opposite, his face illuminated intermittently by the console's green glow, reviewing notes on a tablet. Sergeant Major Kane flanked the recruits, his presence a silent enforcer, ensuring no further words passed in the tense quiet. Sykes stared out the window, his jaw set, the mud from his push-ups still caked on his sleeves, a visible mark of the day's turning point. They touched down at 21:30, the downdraft kicking up grit from the tarmac, rotors slowing to a whine before cutting out. Elena unbuckled first, clipping Rex's lead as the group disembarked in orderly fashion, boots hitting concrete with muffled thuds. The base air was cooler here, laced with the faint ozone of distant generators and the ever-present hum of perimeter patrols. Floodlights cast long shadows across the parade square, where a few late-night sentries stood post, rifles slung low. "Form up by the ready room," Harlan directed, his voice cutting through the rotor wash's echo. The recruits complied, movements mechanical from fatigue, their rucks left for quartermaster collection. Elena fell in at the rear with Rex, her eyes scanning the line. Patel's posture straight despite the wear, Jenkins favoring his ankle but refusing aid, Riley avoiding Sykes's gaze. The provocation had escalated from whispers to formal scrutiny, the Bothy's debrief, pulling it into the chain of command's light. Duty now required her to document it fully, facts over emotion, preserving the regiment's procedural integrity. But as they marched toward the low-slung briefing hut, her conscience weighed the ripples. Sykes's words had exposed not just personal bias, but a systemic undercurrent in selection, where legacies and gender intertwined like tangled bootlaces. Ignoring it might maintain harmony. Addressing it could forge stronger operators, her father's quiet reform echoing in her resolve. Inside the ready room, the air was warmer, thick with the aroma of stale coffee from an urn in the corner, and the faint polish of oiled rifles racked along the walls. Fluorescent strips buzzed overhead, casting a clinical pallor on the folding chairs and projector screen. Harlan gestured the group to seats, Kane distributing water bottles with curt efficiency. "This isn't over," the captain began, pacing the front like a drill instructor on subdued review. Sykes front and center. The corporal rose, saluting sharply, his uniform's creases sharp despite the grime. The others shifted, the room's hush broken only by the tick of a wall clock and Rex's soft pant at Elena's feet. "Repeat your grievance," Harlan ordered, arms crossed. Sykes stood tall, voice steady, but edged with the day's deflation. "Sir, during the tab, doubts arose about Staff Sergeant Hargrove's qualifications, tied to her father's service. I voiced it to clarify chain integrity. She corrected me with PT, which I accepted." His eyes flicked to Elena, a mix of defiance and calculation. Kane interjected, notepad in hand. "Witnesses?" Patel raised a hand, her tone measured. "Present, sir." The exchange questioned her command based on family, not performance. She handled it per protocol, no escalation. Jenkins nodded from his seat, adding softly, "Saved my hide earlier. No doubt there." Riley stayed silent, but his nod was reluctant, the group's fracture visible in the uneven glances. Eleanor remained seated, Rex's ear twitching at the rising tension, his nose nudging her boot as if sensing the moral tightrope. Harlan turned to her. "Staff Sergeant, your account?" She rose, saluting, her beret still angled precisely despite the long day. "Sir, the corporal's remarks disrupted focus at Checkpoint Charlie. Direct reference to my heritage as unearned advantage. My dad was SAS was the crux, implying Birmingham roots and combat experience were insufficient without legacy pull. I issued corrective action to reinforce discipline. No safety risks, but potential for unit cohesion breach." Her words flowed factual, the flat Midlands cadence underscoring each point, no tremor betraying the internal churn. In Helmand, she'd faced worse, insurgents' fire testing her lead, but this was institutional fire where one misstep could tarnish not just her tabs, but the regiment's meritocracy. Kane jotted notes, the pen scratch a rhythmic underscore. "This treads close to Article 19. Conduct prejudicial to good order. Hargrove, any prior incidents with this recruit?" She shook her head. "Negative, Sergeant Major." First tab interaction. Harlan paced again, the floorboards creaking under his boots. "Selection isn't a social club. Doubts like these echo in the field. Cost lives. Sykes, you're on probation. Extra evals starting tomorrow. Fail one, you're recycled." The corporal saluted, face paling slightly, but he held composure. "Understood, sir." The captain addressed the group. "Learn from this. Hargrove's earned her place. 2 tours, K9 quals, ops you haven't touched. Mock that and you're mocking the regiment. The debrief wrapped at 22:30. The recruits dismissed to quarters with orders for 500 muster. Eleanor lingered as they filed out, Harlan pulling her aside near the coffee urn. "Solid report. Your old man, Hargrove Sr., pulled me out of a scrape in '98. He'd say you're handling this right. Quiet. Firm." His nod was brief, a rare bridge across ranks, the scar on his jaw catching the light like a commendation. Kane added gruffly, "File the full log by morning. We'll review for tribunal if it festers." Elena saluted, clipping Rex's lead tighter. "Yes, sir." As the door clicked shut behind them, the room emptied, leaving only the hum of the lights and the dog's steady gaze. Outside, the base pathways were lit by sodium lamps, casting pools of orange on the wet concrete. Eleanor walked Rex toward the kennels, the night's chill nipping at her neck. The distant bark of other handlers' dogs a nocturnal chorus. Patel caught up, falling in step. That took guts, not calling him out harder. The lads needed to hear it from brass. Elena nodded, the weight of the day settling like rucksack straps. Guts or protocol, lines thin. My dad always said, fix it in the ranks, not the headlines. They parted at the barracks fork, Patel's salute lingering a fraction long, a subtle gesture of alliance forged in shared scrutiny. In the kennel block, the air shifted to the familiar musk of straw and fur, rows of enclosures quiet, save for the soft snores of resting animals. Elena settled Rex into his run, brushing mud from his coat with steady strokes, his eyes half closed in contentment. "You saw it coming, didn't you, boy?" she murmured, the bond a silent debrief, no words needed, just the rhythm of her hand and his relaxed sigh. Her own quarters waited nearby, a Spartan bunk with a single photo on the locker. Her father in beret, arm around a younger her, both smiling after her passing out. Legacies weren't burdens, they were compasses, guiding through the fog of doubt. By midnight, she sat at her desk under a gooseneck lamp, logbook open, pen tracing the events with procedural precision. Timestamps, quotes, outcomes. The moral tension eased slightly on paper, obedience documented, conscience voiced without excess. But as she signed off, the ripples extended. Sykes's probation could reform him, mentor the group on merit over myth, or expose biases higher up. In the SAS, where shadows hid the real fights, this public reckoning was the first light, her defiance a catalyst, turning provocation into quiet institutional shift. Rex's whine from the adjacent run pulled her from thought. She rose, letting him curl at her feet for the night. Dawn would bring the next tab, but the true test lingered in the chain's response, her integrity the unyielding thread holding it taut. The base fell silent, the quiet breath of order restored, yet transformed. Dawn broke over the Hereford base, with a pale light filtering through the barracks windows, the air carrying the crisp bite of dew on the training fields and the distant lowing of cattle from the Welsh borders. Elena Hargrove rose at 4:30, her movements precise as she dressed in fresh fatigues, the starched fabric whispering against her skin. Rex stirred in his run adjacent to her quarters, his tail thumping against the straw as she entered to clip his lead. The kennel's familiar scents, damp fur, polished leather, and faint traces of kibble, grounded her, a ritual before the day's muster. She scratched behind his ears, feeling the steady pulse of his neck. "Another round, boy, keep sharp." His dark eyes met hers, a silent vow in the dim bulb's glow. By 0500, the parade square hummed with activity, recruits forming ranks under the floodlight's fading glare, boots scraping concrete in synchronized steps. Elena took her position at the front, beret angled just so, her logbook tucked under her arm from the night's filing. Captain Harlan and Sergeant Major Kane stood nearby, their postures erect, clipboards in hand for the morning brief. The group, 20 strong minus any overnight drops, snapped to attention as Harlan called them up. Sykes was there, front row, his face clean-shaven but shadowed with fatigue, the probation hanging like an unspoken weight on his shoulders. "Stand easy," Harlan began, his voice carrying across the square, the faint echo bouncing off the low brick buildings. "Yesterday's tab exposed fractures. Selection demands unity. Doubt erodes it like rain on weak stone." He scanned the lines, eyes lingering on Sykes, then Elena. Staff Sergeant Hargrove's leadership held the line. Her actions, saving Jenkins, enforcing discipline, upheld the regiment's code. Questions about merit, family, or origins have no place. They undermine the chain. Kane stepped forward, his broad frame casting a long shadow. Sykes, report forward. The corporal double-timed it, saluting with precision, the group holding breath in the chill air. Corporal, your probation starts now. Extra navigation drills, paired with Hargrove for oversight. Prove your words were a misstep, not a pattern. Kane's tone was gravelly, brooking no appeal, the pen in his hand scratching a final note. Sykes nodded sharply. Understood, Sergeant Major. Harlan addressed the whole. This isn't punishment, it's reform. The SAS builds operators who trust without reservation. Hargrove's integrity sets the standard. Emulate it. The words rippled outward, Patel's subtle nod visible in the ranks, Jenkins standing taller despite his limp. Riley shifted, his earlier smirks absent, replaced by a focused stare at the ground. The morning mist clung to their boots, the scent of wet grass mixing with the oiled tang of rifles slung at rest. Eleanor felt the shift like a tide turning, her defiance, logged and aired, now catalyzing quiet change. Duty had preserved protocol, conscience had forced the mirror. As the brief ended with a crisp, dismissed, the recruits broke formation, murmurs low but altered, carrying respect where mockery had festered. She led Sykes and a small team to the navigation course first, Rex trotting ahead, his paws silent on the dew-slick path. The course wound through dense woodland, map points hidden in the underbrush, the air thick with pine sap and the earthy rot of fallen leaves. "Follow my lead, Corporal," she said evenly, unfolding her map under a canopy of oaks, the branches creaking softly in the breeze. Sykes fell in beside her, his ruck adjusted tight, no retort this time, just a curt, "Aye, Staff Sergeant." They moved methodically, compass bearings checked against terrain, Rex alerting to an obscured marker with a low whine, his nose questing the damp soil. Elena explained each step, her voice steady, the Birmingham vowels threading through commands like rebar in concrete. "Legacies inform but don't define. My father's service, Falklands, Ulster, taught endurance. I earned my tabs in Helmand, same as you will." Sykes listened, sweat beading on his brow as they scrambled a low ridge, the river's murmur below a constant underscore. At the first point he paused, tracing the coordinates himself. "Understood. That save yesterday. Didn't see it coming. Dog too." It was concession, raw and unpolished, the first thread of mentorship weaving in. By midday, the extra drills had the group rotating through scenarios. Blind nav under simulated low-vis, Elena pairing recruits to demonstrate bonds over barbs. Patel took to it seamlessly, her quiet efficiency earning nods from Kane, who observed from a distance, binoculars glinting in the sun. Jenkins, taped ankle notwithstanding, pushed through a water crossing, Riley hauling him across without complaint. The provocation's echo faded under the grind. Sykes' probation not isolation, but integration, forcing him to confront bias through action. Elena radioed updates to base. Drills progressing, cohesion improving. Static hissed back, "Affirmative, keep it tight." Lunch was field rations under a camouflage net, the metallic zip of MRE pouches mixing with subdued chatter. Rex gnawed a chew toy at Elena's side, his presence a bridge, loyalty embodied, no words required. Sykes sat across, forking beans methodically. "Staff Sergeant." "About yesterday." "Was out of line. Your dad's rep, I get it now, not a free pass." Elena met his gaze, the net's shadows dappling her face. "It's not about rep, Corporal. It's about the team. Prove it here, and the rest follows." He nodded, the weight lifting incrementally, the group's eyes on them. A silent witness to reform taking root. Afternoon brought the full unit to the confidence course. High wires over mock ravines, the wind whistling through the cables like distant radio chatter. Elena oversaw from below, Rex barking encouragement as recruits traversed, their harnesses creaking under strain. Sykes went second, his movements deliberate, no hesitation at the drop. When he reached the end, he saluted her, crisp, held a beat long. The gesture rippled. Riley followed suit after his run. Jenkins, too, the chain mending through example. Harlan watched from the sidelines, a faint approval in his stance. This was Redemption's quiet forge, Eleanor's moral stand sparking not just Sykes' growth, but the unit's, turning individual defiance into collective strength. As the sun dipped toward the tree line, casting golden shafts through the leaves, Eleanor gathered the group for closeout. Today's progress honors the regiment. Loyalty isn't inherited, it's built, one drill at a time. Rex sat alert beside her, tail sweeping the dirt, sensing the harmony. Whispers had turned to affirmations. Hargrove's solid, Brummy grit holds. The cost of her integrity, nights of doubt, the public glare, yielded transformation. Her legacy now intertwined with theirs, a symbol of conscience over command's rigid lines. Back at the square by 1800, the muster dissolved into evening routine, the base's lights flickering on against the twilight. Elena walked Rex to the kennels, the day's warmth lingering in her muscles, the faint ache a badge of progress. Sykes passed, offering a nod, no words, just respect earned. In the SAS's shadowed world, reform bloomed not in fanfare but in these subtle shifts. A salute held firm, a handler's bond unbroken, the institution learning through one woman's unyielding stand. The moral arc bent toward justice, her defiance the pivot, rippling toward legacies redefined. If this story already has your respect, hit the like button. It helps the story of Elena Hargrove reach those who still believe in honor. The weeks following the tab blurred into the relentless cadence of selection's second phase, a gauntlet of interrogation simulations and endurance circuits that tested not just bodies, but the fragile weave of trust Elena Hargrove had begun to mend. The Hereford base thrummed with its usual rhythm, the sharp crack of blank rounds echoing from the kill house, the low growl of diesel generators feeding the ops center, and the perpetual scent of gun oil and sweat-soaked webbing hanging in the air like an unspoken challenge. Eleanor moved through it all with Rex at her heel, his paws padding softly on the gravel paths, his presence a constant reminder of bonds forged beyond words or ranks. Sykes's probation had evolved into something more, a deliberate integration under Elena's oversight. Morning started with paired navigation runs through the Wye Valley's mist-shrouded trails, where the river's murmur competed with the rustle of leaves underfoot. "Bearing 270, Corporal," she'd call, her voice steady over the crunch of boots, compass needle glinting in the dappled light. Sykes would confirm, his responses clipped at first, then laced with questions. "How'd you spot that false crest in Helmand? Instinct or training?" Elena answered factually, drawing from ops where Rex's nose had traced enemy trails through scorching dust, her Birmingham roots grounding the tales in grit rather than glory. No lectures, just demonstration, the quiet reform her father had embodied, turning doubt into discipline one measured step at a time. The group's dynamics shifted incrementally, like a patrol adjusting formation after contact. Patel sought Elena out during evening gear checks in the armory, the metallic tang of solvent sharp in the air. "The lads are talking different now, about merit, not myths. Sykes even shut down a whisper in the mess last night." Elena nodded, oiling her sidearm with rhythmic strokes, the slides click a punctuation to their exchange. It's the chain working. One link holds, the rest follows. Jenkins, his ankle healed but his gratitude etched deeper, volunteered for K9 familiarization drills, learning to read Rex's subtle cues. The ear flick for hidden threats, the low whine for unease. Riley, once quick with smirks, now deferred during briefings, his salutes held firm. The provocation's scar had faded, replaced by a cohesion that hummed through the ranks, loyalty not imposed, but earned in the grind. Word of the incident rippled upward, as it always did in the regiment's tight-knit corridors. Captain Harlan summoned Elena to his office one overcast afternoon, the room sparse with its oak desk scarred from years of reports, and a single window overlooking the parade square, where recruits drilled under a leaden sky. "Your log sparked a review," he said, sliding a folder across the blotter, the paper whispering against wood. "DS commands updating the instructor protocol, mandatory sessions on bias in leadership training. Your stand with Sykes. It's the catalyst, quiet but effective." Eleanor stood at attention, Rex sitting alert beside her, his tail brushing the linoleum. Understood, sir. Just doing the job. Harlan's scar twitched in what passed for a smile. More than that, Hargrove. Your old man would call it legacy work, proving the system's stronger for the pushback. The reform extended beyond selection, threading into the broader SAS fabric. During a joint exercise with the K9 unit from Credenhill, Elena briefed a mixed group of handlers and operators, the hangar echoing with the clatter of crates and the soft whines of dogs settling into harnesses. Trust starts with the unspoken, she explained, demonstrating Rex's alert sequence. A paw tap for confirmation, his dark eyes locking on the handlers. Sykes, now off probation and assigned to shadow her, assisted seamlessly, passing a simulated scent vial without hesitation. The visiting sergeant major from the parent regiment observed, nodding approval. Heard about your tab dust-up, handled it right. No drama, just results. We're incorporating it into the merit module for new DS. Eleanor felt the weight lift slightly, the moral tension uncoiling. Her conscience's defiance hadn't shattered the chain. It had reinforced it, sparking institutional eyes on the shadows where prejudice hid. By phase's end, as the survivors, 12 from the original 20, gathered for the badge ceremony in the Sterling Lines Hall, the air thick with polished leather and the faint polish of brass fittings, Elena stood at the periphery with Rex, his coat gleaming under the chandelier's soft glow. Harlan pinned the wings on each chest, the fabric's tear subtle against the murmur of pride. Sykes approached last, his new tabs catching the light, saluting her with a gaze stripped of challenge. Staff Sergeant, thank you. For the push. She returned it, hand steady. Earned it, Corporal, wear them well. Patel, wings fresh on her shoulder, joined them briefly, her voice low. You've changed how we see command. Women like us, it's easier now. The words hung, a quiet testament to the ripple. One act expanding to mentorship, her integrity a beacon for those navigating the regiment's unyielding paths. The ceremony closed with the regimental toast, glasses clinking in restrained unison, the hall's vaulted ceiling amplifying the oath's echo. Duty, loyalty, honor. Elena slipped out early, walking Rex across the dew-kissed fields toward the kennels, the night's chill carrying the distant hum of a sentry's patrol. Her father's voice resurfaced in the quiet, a memory from their Edgbaston garden. The SAS isn't about the beret, love. It's about leaving it better for the next. She'd done that, her defiance transforming mockery into reform, the system learning through her unblinking stand. No fanfare, just the subtle shift. Salutes held longer, doubts voiced less. Bonds like hers and Rex's mirroring the regiment's renewed thread. In the kennel, under the soft glow of a nightlight, Elena settled beside Rex, his head in her lap, the rise and fall of his flanks a rhythm of unbreakable trust. The cost of integrity, scrutiny's glare, the internal war, had yielded legacy, a symbol of moral strength where duty and conscience aligned, forging warriors who questioned wisely and followed fiercely. The base fell still, stars wheeling overhead, the quiet breath of transformation settling like mist on the parade square. Eleanor Hargrove, combat vet from Birmingham, had proven it. Provoke the wrong resolve, and the ranks would remember why. Subscribe for more stories of loyalty, courage, and justice within the ranks. Thank you for watching the case of My Dad Was SAS. Recruits aimed at her, then learned why you don't provoke a combat vet from Birmingham. See you in the next one.